Achewillow, Season 6, Chapter 5, Old Enemies Anew. There was a time when I was filled with purpose. It was not purpose fueled by contentment or plenty. True purpose is seldom the result of comfort, ease, or means. There's a power to desperate need that one can either let drive you or crush you. For much of my childhood, I had struggled to set a destination for my life. Not unusual for teenagers to find themselves adrift like this, but I was one of those who also lacked noise to fill that silence. I stared into the distance of my future, and all I saw was a series of desk jobs and cold, hungry loneliness. I was part of no Girl Scout troop. I had few friends. No musical instrument or ambition nibbled at my free time. The only din capable of filling existence was that of spoon beating on the walls of a mixing bowl. With time, that sound became louder, taking on a unique melody. The landscape of my life began to fill out. Distant, busy parents were replaced by dreams of traveling to France and studying pastry. The meager salary of the service jobs I'd suffered toppled under the weight of a successful career as a world-renowned chef. Obscurity and anonymity were illuminated by the bright promise of my name in gold print on the cover of leather-bound menus. So was purpose born in me, fresh-baked from the raw ingredients of what I saw as an empty life, based on the foundation of a hobby that had become a passion and soon obsession. When not practicing my craft, I would draw lists of plans for what I'd do once I graduated. I learned all I could of the restaurant industry. I knew the impossible odds I was setting myself against and how narrow my chances of making it were. But like a gambler emboldened by high stakes, the risk only made the goal more tempting. Purpose is a funny thing. It builds its own noise, drowning out doubt and fear. I didn't get into the school I wanted. I never got to travel to Paris and learn from the very best. And it took some prodding from my brother to get me there, but once I got into cooking school, it felt like every obstacle had been there to bolster my purpose further. Miriam Dufour has gotten this far. Nothing can stop her. That was my thought as I went through the first week of classes. The program was sufficiently challenging to hold my interest, yet easy enough that I felt my success assured. On Monday, I was hopeful and elated, but by Thursday, I was already planning my internship at a Michelin star restaurant. But then, on Friday, I met Chef Frederic Gagnon. For long, I thought of him as the fork to the soufflé of my purpose. I accused him, in my mind, of having deflated my ambitions into oblivion. With hindsight, I realized that this isn't true. Gagnon didn't ruin my purpose, but rather, through his words and actions, he changed them. The weight of his skill made me forget most of my plans, wanting instead to impress this colossus of the culinary arts. His abrasive nature reshaped my admiration into loathing, making me want to suffocate his arrogance. His contempt made things less a matter of joy than pride. Frederic Gagnon had gone from a man I wanted to make my mentor to one I needed to defeat. Class was no longer about teaching and learning, but a duel of who could find bigger fault in the other. He made me forget who was in a position of power and who was not. And now, over 2 years after getting kicked out of school because of the man, he stands in my cafe, flanked by friends new and old. I feel like that first-year student getting torn down for overcooking or coq au vin. He walks through the dining room full of customers that I can no longer hear. folding his leather gloves neatly into his coat pockets, his pale blue eyes scanning the Achewillow like the plating of a main course, looking for flaws to pick at. I want to pull every pastry from the display, every cupcake from the counter. The need to hide my works and then myself is primal, and I can feel my fingers digging into my palms as a result. Even the scar in my belly, the one given me by a hunger demon, aches at his presence. He's in my cafe, and yet it feels like I no longer hold any power here. Chef Gagnon makes a point not to notice me. His focus is instead on my madeleines and macarons. Unlike my other patrons, he isn't picking a treat to nibble on with a hot cup of coffee. There's no hunger in his eyes, and his thin lips remain dry and unmoving. Instead, he's a visitor at a museum, looking over the exhibits with the eye of an expert, seeking not art to admire, but rather forgeries to uncover. If not for the grace of the glass protecting them, he would pick up and poke the baked goods, testing their smell and judging their texture. His is not a detached appraisal either. For all his pretense and appearance, Gagnon is not one to shy away from getting his hands dirty. He kneels before the display, hungry for a closer look at my pastries, before getting back up, brushing the dust from his knees. I want to break this unbearable silence, slapping him again with that sass of mine he loathed so much in class. Yet, I can't. Frozen instead while he finishes his thorough evaluation of my goods. Our eyes finally meet as Chef Gagnon deigns to look in my direction. There's a softening of his features, though it lingers on the edge of perceptibility. There is, however, no sign of sudden recognition. He knew I would be here, and my presence is no surprise. It makes me feel like my view of our shared past is some overblown dramatic mess of my own imagining. Still not a fan of piping, are we, Miss Dufour? Of all the words in the English language, and of all the orders they could have been put in, this was not what I expected out of Gagnon's mouth upon our reunion. Piping? Is that going to be his gripe when judging my cafe? No, I am not a fan of piping. The explanation pushes at my throat like a trapped breath seeking escape. Piping is camouflage. It's an excuse to add buttercream and sugar to unremarkable sponges. Not that I reject it, but rather I find that piped frosting and decoration should be used sparingly, as emphasis, and with care not to overwhelm the other flavors. I run a cafe, not a social media empire. That's what I want to spit back at him, the same justification I gave him 3 years ago. The best I can manage is an open-mouthed, "What?" He smiles, thin lips pushing the lines of his face away from what I think is meant to be good humor. It's hard to see the malice in it, but I have no doubt that it's in there somewhere. "One of each, Miss Dufour," he announces, pointing his finger to the ceiling like a conductor demanding of his brass section. "Let's see what my best student is made of." "One of each?" I repeat each word slowly, as if their collective meaning had escaped me. "As simple an order as one can expect, Miriam," he says, turning to look for an empty table. "There's nothing to take down or remember. I think any idiot could manage it." I mouth the words again to myself, but Chef Gagnon is already walking away. The world is slow to regain focus. The sound of the dining room and the worried faces of my friends return 1 teaspoon at a time. I can feel my palms ache from pain, and I only now notice that I've been holding on to the wooden spoon in my apron pocket this whole time, like a child crushing a stuffed toy to her chest for safety. Fighting the urge to run upstairs to my apartment, I busy myself putting together the order. It's a long list of items, after all. And if Gagnon is going to come in here and re-traumatize me all over, I'm going to make it worth my while. One of each he wants, one of each he'll get, even items that were not on display. Even as I bring him the first plateful, an arrangement of chicken, beef, and falafel wraps, accompanied by a small dish of homemade garlic and red pepper hummus, I start to realize what business the chef is about. The plate is heavy in my hands, heavier than it should be, but I'm no idiot. Gagnon isn't just ravenously hungry. No, he's pushing his judgment of my cuisine to the absolute limit. I don't pretend to know how well his visit was planned, but that he's here on my official reopening day, when I'm most likely to have put my best foot forward, that's no coincidence. He's giving me the ultimate evaluation, the end boss of final exams. For what diploma I'm fighting, I don't know, but I refuse to not give it my all. Pride will not allow that. Plate after plate crowds his small table, the one in the corner under the painting of the twin-steepled church. He shares the food with Stefan and Bertrand, and while he takes a careful nibble of everything, never does an emotion betray him. Stefan has always been like drywall with his expressions, leaving only Bert as a thermometer of my success, but even he's of little use, having never been much of a gourmet. I'm glad to see the food isn't going to waste. While Gagnon doesn't eat the majority, leaving Madeleine's brioche, macarons, and cookies nearly untouched, his acolytes offer any leftovers they don't devour themselves to neighboring tables. Like bread rising, a strange chemistry occurs. From the epicenter of Gagnon's table, my food radiates. As the closest tables get their fill, they pass on the leftovers to the next layer. The process then repeats. Before long, the dining room has become a free-for-all of sampling. Everyone gets to break off a spoonful of something they perhaps had never tasted before. When no money is involved and only a bite is at risk, customers become more adventurous. Judging from the smiles, the laughs, and the passing around of dishes and bowls, I expect many a patron has found a new favorite from my menu. There goes my curated list of usuals. Like an island lost at sea, Chef Gagnon doesn't even seem to notice the impact of his presence and actions. His attention is entirely consumed by the food. My food. In time, diffuse sunshine is replaced by forbidding darkness, and the din of customers drinking, talking, eating, and walking in and out is replaced by folk music and the sweep of a broom on tiles. I wanted my first day to be a success. My ego would accept nothing short of a celebration in the name of the Achewillow and the Dufour cooking legacy. Never had I considered for a moment the old warning, to be careful what you wish for. The idea that there might be too many customers, too much praise, or an overabundance of opportunities had never crossed my mind. Lazy guitar riffs and soulful lyrics are occasionally interrupted by the clinking of metal on ceramic, the telltale song of stirring. "Are you sure we can't help?" Annabelle offers for the 100th time. No, I told you. Dishes are in the dishwasher, tables are scrubbed. I just need to finish the floor and I can join you for a drink. "Well," she says, a little more boisterous than usual, "if drinks is what we're having, there's a few things I can make for us, if you give me the run of the liquor cabinet." A joint pops as I lean over to sweep under a table, the sharp pain of it flashing briefly in my right knee. Yet I smile. I'd intended on coffee, but Annabelle might be right. Perhaps this is the sort of night one celebrates with something stronger. "I'll even make something with apple cider," Annabelle continues, pushing her sales pitch to include my other remaining guest. "Don't you go ruining my cider with any of your cheap vodka and sambuca, or whatever you kids are putting in your drinks these days." I hear a gasp and turn in time to see Annabelle clutch imaginary pearls. Her mouth is a perfect O of indignation. "I would never disrespect a Fig's Orchard cider with some college party concoction. Madam, you are an institution, and your products are to be respected." Olivia tightens her lips into a smile, but tilts her head, waiting for the other side of the compliment to show itself. "But," Annabelle adds, I have been experimenting with your ciders, and I've been dying to get your opinion. We both see it at the same time, Olivia and I. That thirst to impress, the need for the approval of what she sees as her mentors and tutors. How much of it has been bolstered by today's successes, I wonder? All right, I say, picking up a dustpan. Have at it, but don't waste my booze. I need it for cooking. Olivia, if you can toss a few of the leftover pastries out to the raccoons, I think we'll be just about done here. Going to bars in Montreal, or when doing my own cooking, splashing Grand Marnier on crêpe Suzette or preparing amaretto mousse, alcohol has always been something one measured with either heart or wallet. Bartenders make a show of overflowing measuring cups, while cooks go by instinct and taste. Never have I seen someone measure proportions with as much precision as Annabelle does tonight. She's like a chemist, worried that a drop too much lemon juice might blow the whole Achewillow apart. Olivia and I monitor her choice of ingredients with care. I see my friend wince as Annabelle adds a touch of ginger syrup to her cocktail, and I have to raise an eyebrow at the amount of gin she pours. When everything is added atop a generous portion of ice, Annabelle stirs her potion with a clean butter knife in lieu of a bar spoon. Clockwise, I correct, struggling to keep myself from reaching out to still her hand. Right. She's quick to change direction, to my relief. The drinks are served in copper mugs, like one would a mule, and has a pleasant bite to its aroma. I would have preferred some mulled wine or hot cider in this temperature, but the ginger promises something to warm the soul. It's a good drink. The apple cider cuts clear through the other ingredients, riding their flavor rather than fighting it. Like meat in a good stew, it benefits from the support of spices and veggies without surrendering anything to either. I could go into a deeper analysis. Though I'm not a drink critic, my taste buds have been trained to allow no detail to escape their perception, and I like to think I have pretty good tastes in general. However, my attention keeps going back to that table in the corner, the one under the painting of the twin-steepled church, where Frederick Gagnon sat for the whole afternoon and much of the evening. Not a morsel of my inventory went untasted by the man, and not a word was said about any of the dozens of dishes, pastries, and treats that I brought to his table. Some items he reordered, pulling out a neat moleskin notebook in which he scribbled between each bite. I blame Thomas, I finally say between two sips. The podcaster? Olivia asks. He's the only reasonable suspect. He loves the food here. He goes to all of those digital media creator events. No force in the universe can shut him up. If anyone's had a chance to run into Gagnon and snitch about my whereabouts, it has to be him. And that's a bad thing? Olivia sips from her mug again. Each time her lips touch the cocktail, she squints a little, reminding me of Gagnon during his final hour at the Achewillow. A handful of dishes had made it to a final third round. Those he ate. None of his plates were polished, but he took real bites, chewing purposefully, enjoying the meals as they were meant to be. His features loosened, allowing for reactions to peek from behind the mask. I hate to admit it, but his was the face I'd seen reflected in the brass tubes of the coffee machine. It's the face I make when I struggle to find something wrong with a new recipe. And it's the face Olivia's making, drinking her own cider with extras. Is Thomas Sinclair sending my arch-nemesis to my coffee shop a bad thing? Yes. Does my arch-nemesis now having his own successful online food review show make it worse? Terribly so. Olivia smiles that calm smile of hers, the one she wears when she's confident in her own wisdom. He probably meant nothing by it, she reassures. Oh, it's far worse than not meaning anything by it. I'll bet you what's in the register that he's confident he did me a favor. He's probably been sitting on this for weeks now, waiting for me to call and thank him for such an opportunity. How fortunate I am to have the one and only Thomas Sinclair as a friend. There's a pause. This time, Olivia takes a good swig from her mug. It's the kind of swig you take while sitting on a front porch in the evening, looking at the sunset while killing time with friends. It's probably how she and her husband Henry spend their best evenings, tasting their ciders. It's an honest swig. "Pretty damn fortunate if you ask me," she says. "What are you going to say?" "I don't know. He hasn't so much as commented on the food. All he did is buy, taste, and take notes. What if he goes out to his thousands of 2.6 million? He made a point of it." I'm stunned by the size of the audience, but I soldier on with my point. "Fine. What if he goes out to his 2.6 million viewers and he trashes my cooking?" "He won't." She takes another honest swig. "Not if he's being genuine. And what if he does? Your customers are here in Achewillow. Who cares if he gives you a bad review to a bunch of strangers who would never have come to town anyway?" I care. What if that becomes my only reputation outside of town? Am I trapped here from that point on? Sure, I love it here, but that love hinges on my liberty to leave. I need the freedom to make Achewillow part of my story, not the end of it. I turn to ask Annabelle's opinion. Usually, that's not something that needs requesting. She's not one to shy from sharing her point of view with friends. Yet, ever since mixing the apple cider cocktails, she's been suspiciously silent. And I've been too self-involved to even notice, too busy discussing if I should accept Gagnon's offer and be part of his show. Time seems to have stopped for Annabelle. She stands behind the counter, her drink untouched and her eyes dancing between us. Her expression is blank, like a student waiting for test results. She served us one of her own recipes, and we immediately turned our back on her to talk of other matters. "So," she says, leaning in a little and grinning with expectation. I'm about to fumble a string of apologies, tossed with a generous helping of random compliments, all meant to diffuse her anxieties. After all, I've been in Annabelle's shoes so many times before, watching a friend or family member chew as I await their judgment. Good thing I have Olivia to better handle this. "I'll have another," she says, pushing her empty mug towards Annabelle. Another is the best compliment a cook or bartender can get. And Chef Gagnon said that twice for almost a dozen of my dishes. I pull a stool behind the counter, eager to sit and rest my weary legs. Standing all day long is bad enough, but the ceaseless walking back and forth while carrying the weight of well-aged anxieties is pure torment. To take the weight off one's legs is to also remove from the soul's burden. The relationship I share with this end-of-day ritual is a fraught one at best. On some evenings, the balancing of the register, printing of receipts, and inventory of products, separating which can be sold tomorrow and which should be donated or trashed, is a pleasure. It's the kind of busy work that reminds me that I have my own cafe. Nothing says entrepreneur like going through the numbers on the daily. Then there are days when I remember how much I hate math. Those nights when it feels too late and too unimportant to run the ritual of finance. It's a struggle to remind myself the importance of rigor and that whatever I don't do now, I'll have to do later. On those days, it's the voice of Helen Edna that speaks through my memory, and I am often compelled to obey. Besides, as mundane as it might seem, there is a ritual to the daily balancing of the register, and one does not simply mess with ritual. Also, it's a good time to think. I count the money and add up the receipts, all the while juggling with Gagnon's offer. Olivia has a point. What do I have to lose? Even the prospect of being trashed on Gagnon's show doesn't seem like that high a hill to climb from a career perspective. I take a closer look at one of the Canadian quarters on the counter. Looks like one of the many commemorative coins issued by the Canadian Mint. This one has a stylized bison with a green circle above. Truth is, what I'm really juggling are my pride and procrastination. I can't make a wrong decision if I don't make a decision at all. And if I don't make a decision, then I don't have to risk my pride. So, I guess we're doing this? I ask the bison. I'm about to smile at my own silliness, talking to coins, when I'm startled by a brutal rapping on the door. Okay, maybe it wasn't brutal. In fact, the knock might have even been gentle by the standards of the situation. But the silence of the evening and the buffering of my own thoughts would have made even the most subtle noise into a cacophony. Not to mention, late-night surprises in the Achewillow come in all sorts of nasty flavors. "Closed!" I cry, knowing that it wouldn't be the end of it. And I'm right. No sooner do I call out that large hands cup themselves over the glass and a large, curious face. Between the thin sheen of frost on the window and the reflection of the counter lights on the glass, I can barely make out my late-night visitor's features. Curious but cautious, I go around the counter, enduring another round of knocking, this time accompanied by muffled words from a familiar voice. "Gulliver?" I ask, unlocking the door but opening it by just a crack. It's rare enough to see Gulliver. More unusual still that he would show up at this ridiculous hour. But it's an even more precious occurrence that he would be without the dreaded Ophelia hanging off his arm like a parasite. "Hey," he says, matter of fact. "Mind if I come in?" Poking my head out and looking around behind him, I confirm that he's alone and pull the door open. Even with the warmer weather, Gulliver remains dressed like he's off to make deliveries in Antarctica. The hat sits crooked on his head, and his coat remains unzipped, but every piece of winter accoutrement is accounted for, including that accursed knit sweater and scarf. "You missed my grand reopening," I say, allowing the full flow of my disappointment to leak through. Gulliver pulls his coat off, looking around the Achewillow as if checking out an old flame, admiring her anew, but rediscovering all the little changes that come with age. "I like to lie to myself," he says, sitting down on his old stool, "and imagine I'm just a little late. How did it go?" I can't help it. My conscious thoughts are aswim with resentment, each sentence out of my mouth narrowly beating back a cutting remark. Even as I want to wallow in passive-aggressive comments, my hands and feet are busy doing what I do best. "Oh, it was weird," I confess, pulling leftover pastries and cookies from plastic bins, piling them onto a plate. But not Achewillow weird, if you know what I mean. My fingers hover over a glass jar, one containing about a half-dozen biscotti. I touch the knob on the lid, but decide the platter is full enough already. "The whole year's been weird," Gulliver muses, pushing around a caramel palmier with the tip of his finger. I monitor his hesitation while I prepare some coffee. The old machine is unhappy to be awakened once again after a busy day, voicing its displeasure with a jet of burning steam. Gulliver picks up a chocolate chip cookie from the bottom of the plate, twisting it in his hands before his eyes, inspecting the details of it. I've never seen him hesitate, or stop to breathe, before taking a bite of my food. "Listen," I say. "She doesn't have to come between us, you know. I don't have to understand what you see in that woman, but I can learn to accept it. It'd be a shame to let her drive a wedge between us, right?" He drops the cookie, raising his eyes to meet mine. There's something dismissive, almost irreverent in the way he allows the food to fall from his fingers. I wish it was that simple. The way he looks at me sends a shiver down my spine. I've seen that look before, a long time ago. Back when I didn't know the man quite that well, and my imagination ran wild with made-up stories about his name and intent. I used to carry a fillet knife in my purse back then, just in case. And for the first time in over 2 years, My hand yearns to hold that knife once again. I no longer carry a blade with me, but I'm also no longer the same Miriam I was back then. Things like these are only as complicated as we allow them to be. But if you've come here to warm up Ophelia's threat towards me, you can take your food and go. I owe you because we're friends, but her? I'm not here to threaten you, Miriam. I'd never, you know that. I owe you and Doris too much. But Ophelia, she knows things. She's good at this stuff. Really good. You're an incredible cook, better than Doris. But when it comes to everything else, Ophelia says you're a danger to yourself and everyone around you. The surface of the coffee in my freshly poured mug ripples with the shaking of my hand. It's a struggle to keep from spilling it all. How can he say such things? After all I've done for this town, after everything I've suffered to earn my place here. The mug hits the countertop hard, a few steaming drops burning my hand in the process. My teeth hurt as I clench my jaw, holding back what could be tears and what could be screams. Those are her words, not yours. As I speak, Gulliver reaches for his scarf, but grabs at the collar of his shirt instead. I can almost see the knitting writhe at his touch, the pattern of the wool and the pattern of his behavior both familiar and threatening to see. She's manipulating you, I say. You say you honor Doris's memory, but look what your precious Ophelia's done. I step aside, pointing up above the counter. 5 wooden spoons where there should be 6. Ophelia wouldn't Who else, Gulliver? You were there when she threatened me if I opened the Achewillow. You know how important these heirlooms are to me, how important they were to Doris. Who else but her would sink so low just in an effort to hurt me? You don't have any proof? I cut him off again. I do, Edmund. I reach under the register, my finger grabbing at a soft puddle of blood-colored warmth. Soft under the skin, even as I close my fist around the fabric, I pull out the scarf I found on the tiles of the Achewillow the day I was robbed. Still think she's so innocent? I shake the scarf inches from his face. Maybe I hoped I could shock him out of whatever spell she has on him. Perhaps seeing evidence of Ophelia's malice would push Gulliver into forsaking her, or at least questioning her motives. Instead, he rises. Tall and menacing on a sunny day wearing a smile, Edmund Gulliver Kemper is terror when taken alone at night. And when he's angry, he becomes a veritable avatar of fear. I've served food to demons and sat across the table from creatures I still lack a name for. But there's something unique to the threat of a friend turned against me. The scarf in my hand feels like it's gripping me back, holding my hand with the same force I put upon it. The wool around Gulliver's neck also seems to be tightening, like a knit snake constricting coils to choke him to death. Gulliver? I expect him to storm off, taking his anger and offense with him. I want him to storm off, as it's by far the better outcome to his shadow being cast so dark over me. Instead, he just looms, breathing shallow and angry, his teeth poking from between his lips. His fists are balled up, and the muscles of his arms shift under the thick layers of his sweater. Whoever this is, whether a brainwashed Gulliver or a puppet for his lover, is a force for which I have no defense. Is this the true nature of Ophelia's threat? An audible grinding of teeth followed by a subdued grunt escape my friend's mouth, and I cower a step back. The counter is all that separates us, but with his reach and height, that obstacle is nothing. One more time, I plead to my old friend, but it comes out as little more than a squeak. Gulliver. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.